Blackletter, also known as Gothic script, Gothic minuscule, or Textura, was a script used throughout Western Europe from approximately 1150 to well into the 17th century. It continued to be used for the German language until the 20th century. Fraktur is a notable script of this type, and sometimes the entire group of blackletter faces is incorrectly referred to as Fraktur. Blackletter is sometimes called Old English, but it is not to be confused with the Old English language, despite the popular, though mistaken, belief that the language was written with blackletter. The Old English, or Anglo-Saxon, language predates blackletter by many centuries, and was itself written in the Insular script, or Fudorc runes before that. Origins: Carolingian minuscule was the direct ancestor of blackletter. Blackletter developed from Carolingian as an increasingly literate 12th century Europe required new books in many different subjects. New universities were founded, each producing books for business, law, grammar, history, and other pursuits, not solely religious works for which earlier scripts typically had been used. These books needed to be produced quickly to keep up with demand. Carolingian, though legible, was time-consuming and labor-intensive to produce. Its large size consumed a lot of manuscript space in a time when writing materials were very costly. As early as the 11th century, different forms of Carolingian were already being used, and by the mid-12th century, a clearly distinguishable form, able to be written more quickly to meet the demand for new books, was being used in northeastern France and the Low Countries. The name Gothic. The term Gothic was first used to describe the script in 15th century Italy, in the midst of the Renaissance, because Renaissance humanists believed it was barbaric. Gothic was a synonym for barbaric. Flavio Biondo, in Italia Illustrata, thought it was invented by the Lombards after their invasion of Italy in the 6th century. Not only were blackletter forms called Gothic script, but any other seemingly barbarian script, such as Visigothic, Beneventan, or Merovingian, were also labeled Gothic. This in contrast to Carolingian minuscule, a highly legible script which the humanists called Littera Antiqua, wrongly believing that it was the script used by the Romans. It was in fact invented in the reign of Charlemagne, although only used significantly after the Tira, and actually formed the basis for the later development of blackletter. The blackletter should not be confused either with the ancient alphabet of the Gothic language, nor with the sans serif typefaces that are also sometimes called Gothic. Blackletter typesetting. While an Antiqua typeface is usually a compound of Roman types and italic types since the 16th century French typographers, the blackletter typefaces never developed a similar distinction. Instead, they use letter spacing for emphasis. When using that method, blackletter ligatures like CH, CK, TZ or T remain together without additional letter spacing. The use of bold text for emphasis is also alien to blackletter typefaces. Words from other languages, especially from Romance languages including Latin, are usually typeset in Antiqua instead of blackletter. Like that, single Antiqua words or phrases may occur within a blackletter text. This does not apply, however, to loanwords that have been incorporated into the language. National forms. England. Textualist English blackletter developed from the form of Caroline minuscule used there after the Norman conquest, sometimes called Romanesque minuscule. Textualist forms developed after 1190 and were used most often until approximately 1300, afterward being used mainly for deluxe manuscripts. scripts. English forms of Blackletter have been studied extensively and may be divided into many categories: textureless formatter, textureless precisor, textureless quadrator and semi-quadrator, and textureless rotunda are various forms of high-grade formatter styles of Blackletter. The University of Oxford borrowed the littera Parisiensis in the 13th century and early 14th century, and the littera Oxoniensis form is almost indistinguishable from its Parisian counterpart. However, there are a few differences, such as the round final s forms, resembling the number 8 rather than the long s used in the final position in the Paris script. Chaucer was originally printed in Blackletter, but most presses were switched over to Roman type around 1590. Following the trend of the Renaissance, Horace Walpole wrote in 1781 that, "I am too, though a Goth, so modern a Goth that I hate the Blackletter, and I love Chaucer better in Dryden and Baskerville than in his own language and dress." The final uses of Blackletter in the 17th century were for printing ballads, chivalric romances, and joke books. Cursive English cursive began to be used in the 13th century, and soon replaced littera Oxoniensis as the standard university script. The earliest cursive Blackletter form is Anglicana, a very round and looped script, which also had squarer and angular counterpart. Anglicana formatter. The formatter form was used until the 15th century and also was used to write vernacular texts. An Anglicana bastarda form developed from a mixture of Anglicana and textureless, but by the 16th century the principal cursive Blackletter used in England was the secretary script, which originated in Italy and came to England by way of France. Secretary script has a somewhat haphazard appearance, and its forms of the letters et, g, r, and s are unique, unlike any forms in any other English script. France. Textureless French textureless was tall and narrow compared to other national forms, and was most fully developed in the late 13th century in Paris. In the 13th century there also was an extremely small version of textureless used to write miniature Bibles, known as Pearl script. Another form of French textureless in this century was the script developed at the University of Paris, littera Parisiensis, which also is small in size and designed to be written quickly, not calligraphically. Cursive French cursive was used from the 13th to the 16th century, when it became highly looped, messy, and slanted. Bastarda, the hybrid mixture of cursive and textureless, developed in the 15th century and was used for vernacular texts as well as Latin. A more angular form of bastarda was used in Burgundy, the lettre de forma lettre Burguignon, for books of hours such as the Tres Riches Heures of John, Duke of Berry. Germany. Despite the frequent association of Blackletter with German, the script was actually very slow to develop in German-speaking areas. It developed first in those areas closest to France and then spread to the east and south in the 13th century. However, the German-speaking areas are where Blackletter remained in use the longest. Schwabacher typeface is dominated in Germany from about 1480 to 1530, and the style continued in use occasionally until the 20th century. Most importantly, all of the works of Martin Luther, leading to the Protestant Reformation, as well as the Apocalypse of Albrecht Dürer, used this typeface. Johann Bamler, a printer from Augsburg, probably first used it as early as 1472. The origins of the name remain unclear. Some assumed that a typeface carver from the village of Schwabach, one who worked externally and who thus became known as the Schwabacher, designed the typeface. Textureless German textureless is usually very heavy and angular, and there are few features that are common to all occurrences of the script. One common feature is the use of the letter W for Latin vu or uu. Textualis was used in the 13th and 14th centuries, afterward becoming more elaborate and decorated and used for liturgical works only. Johann Gutenberg used a textualis typeface for his famous Gutenberg Bible, possibly the first book ever to be printed in the Western Hemisphere with movable type, in 1455. Schwabacher, a black letter with more rounded letters, soon became the usual printed typeface, but it was replaced by Fraktur in the early 17th century. Fraktur came into use when Emperor Maximilian I established a series of books and had a new typeface created specifically for this purpose. In the 19th century, the use of Antiqua alongside Fraktur increased, leading to the Antiqua-Fraktur dispute, which lasted until the Nazis abandoned Fraktur in 1941. Since it was so common, all kinds of black letter tend to be called Fraktur in German. Cursive. A German cursive is similar to the cursive scripts in other areas, but forms of AS and other letters are more varied. Here too, the letter W is often used. A hybrid form, which was basically cursive with fewer looped letters and with similar square proportions as textualis, was used in the 15th and 16th centuries. In the 18th century, the pointed quill was adopted for black letter handwriting. In the early 20th century, the subtle inscript was introduced in the schools. Italy. Rotunda. Italian black letter also is known as rotunda, as it was less angular than in northern centers. The most usual form of Italian rotunda was littera bononiensis, used at the University of Bologna in the 13th century. Biting is a common feature in rotunda, but breaking is not. Italian rotunda also is characterized by unique abbreviations, such as Q with a line beneath the bow signifying key, and unusual spellings, such as X for S. Cursive. Italian cursive developed in the 13th century from scripts used by notaries. The more calligraphic form is known as minuscule cancelesca italiana, which developed into a bookhand, a script used for writing books rather than charters. In the 14th century, cancelesca influenced the development of bastide in France and secretary hand in England. The Netherlands. Textualis. A textualis form, commonly known as Gothic or Gothic script, was used for general publications from the 15th century on, but became restricted to official documents and religious publications during the 17th century. Its use persisted into the 19th century for editions of the state translation of the Bible, but had otherwise become obsolete. Unicode. Mathematical black letter characters are separately encoded in Unicode in the mathematical alphanumeric symbols range at U+1D504 to 1D537 and U+1D56C1D59F, except for individual letters already encoded in the letter-like symbols range. This block of characters should be used only for setting mathematical text, as mathematical texts use black letter symbols contrastively to other letter styles. For stylized black letter prose, the normal Latin letters should be used, with font choice or other markup used to indicate black letter styling. The character names used Fraktur for the mathematical alphanumeric symbols, while black letter is used for those symbol characters in the letter-like symbols range. Mathematical Fraktur. Mathematical bold Fraktur. Note fonts supporting the range include Code 2001. For normal text writing, the ordinary Latin code points are used. The black letter style is then determined by a font with black letter glyphs. The glyphs in the SMP should only be used for mathematical typesetting, not for ordinary text. They are of limited use for writing German, as they lack umlaut diacritics and the ligature SS.